Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. So exciting Friday for us. It's a good Friday for us in many ways, other than Good Friday. It's good because this podcast is actually on multiple platforms. So yay.
Yeah.
It's also really good because we're going to talk about AI. And this is our first AI podcast. So it's really good. And then we have a very, very good guest. So this is Marley here with us, Marley Rosario of MJ Ventures. And Marley is actually a serial entrepreneur and also an entrepreneur in AI. And he's going to talk about how AI changes the game for entrepreneurs and for startups. And that's super cool because we all touch entrepreneurs and startups somehow in some shape or form. So Marley, bring it on. Start us off. What's hot? What's on your mind?
Yeah, for sure. So, I want to start off with like a story that, I think it goes to the kind of like the theme of, kind of why I launched into MJ Ventures and some of the success we've seen at MJ. And I think I kind of attribute some of the success to this fact. And so I'm going to take you guys back to my first startup, Gather Activism. So I launched a startup back in start of 2017. It was like my junior year of college, whatever. And it was a platform designed to connect activists and organizers to campaigns and local organizations that needed, support in like sort of like grassroots organizing and politics work. And at the time, I was a student entrepreneur. I had no clue what I was doing. I was trying to apply to all these accelerator programs. And I'm sure, as you guys all know, you guys work with so many startups and whatnot. You spend so much time like preparing the old business model canvas, and then this accelerator program needs a one-pager, and this accelerator plan, this accelerator randomly needs a venture plan. Never heard of that document. All of a sudden, you start hiring someone. You need an NDA template, and the amount of documents, copy, and things as an entrepreneur you start to produce before you even made a single dollar of revenue, you're like, dang, like, I don't know how long I can keep doing this and just keep writing without, actually like implementing, right? And, you get past that phase, and now you don't need as many documents. Now you're trying to do marketing, right? You're like, oh, okay, well, I remember in our first accelerator program we took a marketing, course. It's like, oh, you want to start off with a value proposition. Well, value proposition is easy. That's 2 sentences. Well, then you need a positioning statement. Well, then the positioning statement turns into, your core values and, how those values
it's like give a mouse a donut or whatever that book is.
Literally, exactly. And it's one of those things where it's like, it just snowballs and you find yourself like, dang, like, half of my job is being an entrepreneur and getting on calls with people and trying to convince them of my business idea. Half my time is damn near a copywriter.
Or graduate school, for that matter.
And I didn't. Yeah, exactly. My mom's like, oh, I thought you were studying like data science. Like, I don't know. Why are you writing all these Google documents? Right? Fast forward to now, I launched MJ at the middle of June 2023. And I can tell you guys honestly, like, I recognized, all the time I spent at first, and I was like, you know what, maybe I opened up my old, U Chicago booth class, entrepreneurial class, like templates. I'm like, let's start with the business model canvas. I was like, wait, I'm just going to plug this into ChatGPT, tell them my idea, and just have it generate for me. Like, what's the difference, right? Like, and then from there you workshop and whatnot, but within a day, I got everything I needed. And it just goes to show that, like, now, what's been on my mind a lot is, like, how low of an effort you need to really take to start a business, to launch a business, and validate whether it's a good idea, and more time now needs to just be spent on executing, getting results for folks, getting results for clients and whatnot. And it's allowed MJ to just grow. What I was doing at Gather took me 3, 4, 5 months, took me 2 weeks. Now that I've gotten experience, part of that is experience, right? I know
I was going to say, like, part of that's just you've done it once and you can just borrow your old stuff.
Exactly.
So,
Just
the interesting, well, sorry, Eric.
I was just going to say, just this morning or yesterday, like, Jeff needed a template for a proposal. I'm like, here, use this one that I've used.
Yeah, and it exists, and the idea of templates all exists, but I genuinely think, like, if I was a first-time entrepreneur now with ChatGPT, like, maybe it wouldn't have taken me 2 weeks to come up with all that stuff, but 3 to 4 months, maybe is that a month now, right? Like, it's just so much easier than ever before. And I think it also raises the stakes of, like, hey, like, it's not enough to just come up with a deck and, like, some cool visuals. You need that loom, you need to be good at
what
video.
I did wrong? I just came up with a deck.
Exactly, right.
So I need to. We talked just before we went on air that I was going to ask ChatGPT for some questions, and so I'm going to give you. I have a bunch of them from Chat. I'm sort of representing ChatGPT. ChatGPT's first question was: has AI ever surprised you with a marketing strategy so out of the box that you thought it might have been secretly watching Mad Men reruns?
It's secretly watching Mad Men.
That's how it phrased it. That's funny.
That is exactly what it said. It said that was its first question.
I did not know that ChatGPT is capable of cultural references. But maybe my prompts are always so boring that it gives me a boring answer. So I'm impressed, Jeff, right then and there.
Yeah, well, the first thing is I asked it. I said, "Can you come up with funny questions I can ask somebody who's an AI?"
I wouldn't associate Mad Men with funny, though. That's the tough part.
No, but just I think the pop culture thing. I've got others, so we'll move on from that one. And I think Elena, you had a question.
No, I was gonna actually ask a serious question, and my question is: if you were following both formats, right? I wonder if you just say to ChatGPT, I want the Boost Chicago format for marketing plan. Can you write me one of those? I wonder if it already knows, or if not yet. That's just kind of random, curious question.
It's it's crazy you think about that. So at the time I was using it, right, it was probably June of 2023. So maybe GPT-4 had been out for 2 months at this point. I mean, GPT-4 just the other day turned a year. So it's even crazy to think about that, right? Like, I fed it the document. So I had the marketing plan, right, the marketing template and everything like that. I fed it the document. So, I'd almost wonder, right, like, at the time, they definitely did not promise you. My company uses the ChatGPT for Teams account, so they're not training on our data or anything like that. But I wonder, maybe at the time, were they actually, right? And so the answer might be different. Back then I might have asked it, hey, what's the booth marketing template, right? Probably wouldn't know. But now,
probably does. You know why? Because probably the entire grad school population trained it faithfully by now.
Exactly. So, you almost think like it definitely has started to learn and probably could get an MBA at this point if it wanted to.
Sure.
So it's
probably going to start giving out MBAs to people.
Well, that's scary. Yeah, because, the entire higher education, you probably read, is up in arms because of the usage of AI. And there's now restrictions. And I know that my college freshman gets assignments that she must turn in writing.
Oh, no.
So, yeah.
Handwriting.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is a fascinating thing. So before I was a marketer, I was a high school teacher, and I remember that the head of I was a physics teacher, and the head of the science department was like, I don't allow my students to use graphing calculators because they can put the formula in the graphing calculator. And I always thought this was the strangest thing. It was like, well, why don't we make them use an abacus to do the calculations? Because it's like, it's like the tools exist. If the tools exist in the world, they will be able to use those tools. In fact, by the time they're in the workforce, a couple of years, there will be even better tools. And so I'm not sure exactly, like, it's almost like a laziness on the part of like the,
and maybe the thing is that the thing that needs to be replaced is not the graphing calculator, but the teacher themselves.
Right.
It's
anything negative about my former employer.
I'm gonna say something, and it might sound provocative, but Jeff, I honestly believe education in a year or two is going to be an absolute crisis related to AI, because here's the reason. I was speaking with an individual who's been a long mentor of mine, he's an educational consultant. He works for this larger nonprofit called One Goal, which is basically like an education nonprofit and everything like that. And he said there are constant conversations happening in high schools across America wondering, what are we going to do about this AI problem? And unfortunately, Jeff, the entire conversation is framed from how do we do exactly, the
wrong thing, right? How do we prevent people
from
using it? Yeah, it's so backwards, because it's like everybody is going to need to be literate in how to use ChatGPT, how to use chatbots. In fact, it's, Jeff, you've made the point a few times of like, AI is going to be kind of not even that big of a like right now. It's like, oh, we can do this whole
oh my god,
it's just going to get embedded into everything. And so training our kids to operate in a world where they can't use the tools that actually are that's not helpful. That's like making people do like grease pencil overheads when PowerPoint exists. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah. And I want to shout out the folks. So I actually re-engaged with a few of my entrepreneurship professors at U Chicago since I started at MJ, tell them what we're about, get their advice, yada, yada. And the first thing they told me was, look at how different our entrepreneurship curriculum is now that ChatGPT is out. Like, and I think, entrepreneurial education, right? That's like maybe on the forefront of like using technology and using these tools to automate stuff, right? And become a better entrepreneur. But the thing he told me, the number one thing that professor told me was, I don't see how you could be a modern day entrepreneur and not know how to use these tools. Like it almost seems counterintuitive to say, hey, I'm not going to use the thing that'll make you the most productive at your job that you can be.
Marley, I want to ask you a question on this subject. So for entrepreneurs and startups, what is that stack looking like? What other tools that you think they should be using like daily, aside from ChatGPT?
So it really depends, I think, on the type of entrepreneur, what you're doing, right? The context in which you're using it. So my company, MJ, we are mainly a software engineering IT solutions provider and a data analytics provider. So we help a lot of agencies do data analytics, data analysis. And so my favorite tool actually isn't anything that you would interact with through a chatbot style. It's called Pandas AI. It's an open source data co-pilot. Because I used to be, I'm sure Eric might tell you, like I come from a policy and a data science background. I was in love with Pandas, tidyverse R, did all that stuff, loved it. And then I saw Pandas AI came out, and I was like, damn, you can ask a question to a data frame or basically a spreadsheet and just get an answer, right? Yeah. I don't have to write all this nonsense.
I might have to jump off this call so I can go try that. Right?
I highly recommend.
All right. Geeks unite already.
Yeah.
Well, I went and sat in on this sort of course that was given by I went to the University of Rochester for my MBA program, and they had like a course on AI and generative AI and so forth. And that was something that I just hadn't even, like, just the ability to, I guess in ChatGPT 4.0, you can basically say, create Python code and run it.
Literally.
Native to the platform. And so which is just incredible. It's going to change, like, what's going to become much more important is the ability to understand how to use information rather than the ability to actually just generate information. But this is, I mean, like, this has been happening throughout human history, like over and over again, where like the nature, like it used to be like this, you know, all the intellectuals, their job was to like literally like take a quill and copy, you know, like the manuscripts and whatever. We don't do that anymore because somebody invented the printing press. And it's just the thing that's, I think, so different about, you know, the current era with AI and so forth is that the pace of the change is just accelerating, you know, faster and faster. And I totally agree with you. Like it's just a backwards view of, we actually need to start training our kids to be more adaptable to the changes, as opposed to trying to your point, figure out how to stop them from using the tools.
Unfortunately, and at least from, you know, when I had this conversation with and he works in the hundreds of high schools across America, he said that's the only conversation around AI that educators are having: how to stop, how to prevent. Nothing about let's use ChatGPT to solve this problem. What would the framework look like for an algebraic problem? And, you know, maybe that's a part of, you know, society and the government to be able to say, hey, we need to focus on educating our teachers on what this tool is, how to, you know, show our students on it. But we had an intern at MJ last year. Their first experience with using ChatGPT was with us. Like that, unfortunately, that was the case. And so we trained them up on it. We got them using it and everything like that. And now they're relatively as good as me at working with the tool. But it's a little bit unfortunate that that's the frame that everything is being surrounding around. And I think, like I said earlier, like 2 years from now, Jeff, I think a big crisis is going to happen in education, where we're going to look and say, hey guys, like people are coming out of college and they don't even know how to use ChatGPT really. And tools are faster than folks can educate themselves.
One of the things that, you know, Jeff and I and Elena have talked about before is, I don't know what we call it, the Tesla problem or the self-driving car problem, which I think is related to this, and I think it's related to this need for people to feel like, oh, put the brakes on, no pun intended. But the idea of, if a self-driving car hits a pedestrian and kills them, we got to stop this. It's terrible. Like self-driving cars are horrible and they're killing people, whatever. And nobody's paying attention to the fact that, 85 people in the same number of travel miles just died using the regular car, the non-self-driving car. And it's like this constant, and I see this all the time in my drug discovery work, which is there's just this constant need on people's part. I think it's just because it feels so fast, but they're trying to actually, like, subconsciously, or maybe sometimes not subconsciously, get in the way of the progress that the AI/ML is going to provide.
Well, I think it's probably fear, fear of change, and people are fearful. But listen, I'm not fearful. I need to know the following. I spent a ton of time in Spotfire. Okay. Painful Spotfire, good tool, but painful. What AI can substitute Spotfire? Do you know?
I've never heard of Spotfire.
It's a data representation tool. So
it's like 3D scatter plots and histograms and whatever. It's like a data visualization.
Data viz, data analysis tool. But in order for it to work, you actually have to painstakingly create the frameworks on what goes where.
So this is why I love Pandas AI so much. So you can, it depends on your tech level of technicality. I don't know of any tool that has a UI on it. And that's one of the issues is I'm an engineer, so I don't really like things that have a UI, because I'm like, I prefer to see behind the scenes and be able to go into the source code and fuck with it if I need to. But I think the reason I love Pandas AI as a data copilot so much is, one, it has plotting out the box and including geoplotting as well. So you could do 3D maps, you could do stuff like 3D visuals if you need to.
And you don't need to preset anything for it.
You don't need to preset it. You just load up your data frame, you ask it what you need, and it just comes with it. Obviously, you would need to do that in code, write out, df.write, whatever your question is. But that's one of the reasons I'm a big believer of Pandas AI, is because one, folks are building cool tools on top of it. So let's say you wanted to have a really nice UI and import your custom data sets into it. You can do that. You could spin it up, probably not less than 100 lines of code. But alternatively, if you're somebody who might be on the intermediary code level in terms of like, hey, you can do some basic data manipulation, but beyond that, you might not be accessible. It's an accessible tool for you. And so I would be, again, this, Jeff, goes to my point earlier about a crisis in education. Yeah. I would be pretty surprised if the data science 101 classes by 2026 aren't like having this as a number one module part of the course. Because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, what, like, these tools exist. You're teaching them tools from 10 years ago, like 15 years ago. Like that seems out of order, right? So,
well, except for that's pretty much the way, I mean, I've been around probably a little longer than you have, and that's just pretty much par for the course.
Fair enough.
Everybody's drags their feet by, there's people who are still using probably COBOL or something like that to code things up. I mean, it's like,
so I have two questions for you, one from ChatGPT and then a real question. So my funny ChatGPT question is, if AI had a favorite joke, would it use data analytics to optimize its delivery?
Oh, that's good. That's good. I love that.
It's ChatGPT. Funnier than I am, I think.
It's getting more. It could win runner-up for class clown. It's got something there, yeah.
You're now runner-up class clown to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So my real question for you though is, so you've talked about sort of entrepreneurs and startups, but I know that you also work with nonprofits, and so I'd love to hear how do you see and where do you see the uses of AI and Gen AI in the nonprofit world?
It's a great question, Jeff. And I think, there's two real ways. I'm going to talk about the impact more, not more of like the use case, because there's so many different types of nonprofits, and AI, I think, impacts a nonprofit across the business, across the sort of like departmental view of things, right? You have a client services view, a constituent services, really, in the case of a nonprofit. There's AI tools, copy personalization for your marketing, right? You can use AI even for the admin stuff. You're a small nonprofit founder, and you want to be able to help you write NDA templates, help you write legal templates, whatever. There's tools for that now. But I think the big impact that AI is going to have is it's going to reduce the amount of liabilities in terms of on like a nonprofit's balance sheet. Nonprofits right now, the nonprofit industrial in sort of like complex is suffering from over bloated admin budgets, huge, ginormous budgets of folks that are getting millions, hundreds of millions of, sort of like philanthropic donations and funding that are coming through. And none of that, a lot of that money it's going to good use, but not as much of it as you would think is going to actually making the impact that these nonprofits want to be able to impact. And so if you're not using AI as a nonprofit to really optimize whatever your core operations are, it could be a nonprofit that's doing like, Jose Andres nonprofit that's going into little war zones, right? And dropping down like, food for folks, to like your local nonprofit here on the South Side of Chicago. If you're not using it, then I'm a donor to your nonprofit. I'm going to start asking the questions like, hey, are you being as efficient with my money as you possibly should? Like, should I be thinking about giving my donor, my small donations to another person? Because it doesn't look like you're being a good steward of it. And I think that's the big takeaway we've seen really resonates with folks. Is like, whoa.
Do you see people, are you starting to use it also on the fundraising side as well as the operational side? Or
that's neat, without a question. I mean, the fundraising side was the first place AI was going to turn, because when you talk to nonprofits, the only thing everyone cares about is make sure they raise money, right? So like, it's absolutely, and we're actually in beta testing right now with the organization, with a company called Blue Raven Campaigns. It's launched their own sort of like fundraising AI software. to be able to dial and, basically call donors, do the whole fundraising software, fundraising sort of like gambit. The platform like provides you with AI follow-ups to donors, AI email donors, and there's a bunch of stuff both on the political side and the advocacy side that's coming out of this sort of like recent wave of 2024. But Jeff, just to go back to your original question, like I think there's a lot of nonprofits that are gonna look at this video and they're gonna be like, I'm still hesitant, I'm still on the fence, I'm still like not sure. But I think the big takeaway I give whenever I speak with folks on the executive level of these large INGOs is your donors, you may be skeptical, but I guarantee you in a couple years from now, your donors are going to start not being skeptical and start asking, hey.
Donors are all those kids who are using ChatGPT to write their homework, right?
Exactly, right?
Like, right.
Yeah.
And they're going to wonder.
Or the tech investors of these AI platforms. And so they might be a little bit more sophisticated, say, hey, I'm giving you $100,000 every year. Like, how much of that is going to admin still with all these new tools out, versus actually making the impact that you claim to be making. And so it's been wild to see how many, just you would have like, I can't speak about the exact clients that we're working with at MJ Ventures, but the INGOs that are trying to move as fast as possible to automating key processes that are taking up 5-6 digit, sort of like line items on their balance sheet. Like, hey, we have this entire admin staff that does this, and we're not trying to automate them out, but we need to make them more quicker at what they're doing and better at their jobs so that we're not,
Is it fairly plug and play? Like, can you come into like, do you have, is what you can provide set up so that you can just go into the next company and just say, here, we have this kind of package of tools that we can help you with, or is it very custom?
It depends on who reaches out and what exactly they're looking to do. Sometimes it is really custom. That's just the nature of it. The tools aren't out there for every use case at this point, but a lot of it is custom, plug and play. And I think, Eric, you would be shocked how many organizations, literally shocked, get sizable, revolutionary, like productivity advantages from just getting on ChatGPT for Teams. And I know I'm speaking to you guys and you're like, oh, another guy who's talking about ChatGPT, right? Like there are organizations with 7-8 digit budget amounts that are still very hesitant about putting their stuff on. And there's a lot of misnomers. Hey, we get on ChatGPT, is OpenAI stealing our data?
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. Let's talk about that because I was going to just bring it up. A lot of them are very worried that this type of generative and open tools are going to hack into their data. So let's talk about it. Like, how do they hide or whatever, protect? Like, what are they?
I think the premise is data. Sorry, Elena. I think the premise is backwards. It's like, why do they think they're so creative that nobody else has thought? Like, it's already out there, I think is what the problem is.
If they could have stolen it, they would have already, and they were already trained it on it.
Well, people, like, everybody thinks that their thing is the most creative, newest thing. Like, it just
proprietary.
Never is.
Most documents at an organization, right? Your NDA template isn't like proprietary.
Yeah,
like,
that's
sorry. Like I probably could pay a lawyer $300 an hour to like replicate something very similar.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Elena, one, OpenAI made a commitment that ChatGPT for Teams, it's a new product. So ChatGPT for Teams dropped in January. They made a commitment that anybody who signs up at that level, I think it's $25 per user per month, which is a little bit lower than the normal Plus account. They will not train your data if you're using ChatGPT for Teams. Look, I'm a small business owner. I don't know what's going on in Sam Altman's head or whether that's an actual true statement. But at some point, you have to take, you're a nonprofit, you have to take them at your face value. How do we know Google's not taking all the data that you have in the cloud and training their AI on it, right? Like,
why in the cloud rather than in your email?
Huh?
I said, why in the cloud? Why not in your email?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why, how do we know they're not taking your emails? And at some level, you have to just say, hey, we're going to trust the terms of service that, has been interpreted by hundreds of lawyers. And, it will say OpenAI is putting themselves out to risk that they make that promise and then it ends up not being true. So I'd say that's the first one. And then the second is just quite honestly, this is a little bit technical, but researchers and Eric, I'd appreciate if you had any thoughts on this. Folks are really good at playing catch up. Engineers are relatively good at reverse engineering.
Oh, yeah. Once you know something is possible, it becomes a lot easier.
It becomes a lot easier to start to good. So you would be surprised the quality that folks can get with an open source model. Obviously, that's more expensive, and that comes with development and implementation costs. But the quality standards of open source, I'm not going to claim they're as good as GPT-4, but are they 75, 90% as good?
How good do you need to be useful? Most of us aren't using 5% of its capabilities.
Exactly. And
so Marley, this has been fantastic. I hate to say that we have actually run through this half an hour. It feels like 20 seconds here, but and we would love to have you back. But what we usually do at the end here is we go around and we ask everybody to pick up on one thing that they that they thought was interesting from the conversation. So we always start with our guests. Marley, can you just leave us with one thought?
Yeah, I would just say my biggest takeaway is the story I started with at the top, which is that if you're a young person out there, you're on the fence of hey, should I start this business? Should I not? It's easier than ever, cheaper than ever. And the only thing really holding you back is starting. And with the AI tools that are out there now, I almost argue that it's more expensive not to start and not to test that idea that's been in your head than it is to just get out there and start doing it. So yeah, that's my big takeaway.
Awesome. Elena, you want to jump in?
So to me, the big one was the fact that AI tools can notably lower the admin costs in NGOs. And given that those are usually very transparent, that these organizations would be very compelled to use the tools. In some cases, maybe more so than businesses or private companies. And I actually, never thought about it, but I find it fascinating and I think it's great.
Cool.
Awesome. So, Marley, before I give my takeaway, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, just go to our website, mjventures.org. We're always looking for new people who are building cool stuff and seeing what they're about. So yeah, please.
So it's mjventures, one word, .org.
Yeah, mjventures.org. Yeah.
Great. And I guess for me, the big takeaway was that whole conversation about this crisis that's going to come in education, because there is a mismatch between the way educators are maybe thinking about these new tools as a problem, as opposed to getting educators to think about it as these are the tools that our children are going to need to use going forward. I think that's going to be a really interesting sort of societal shift that we'll see over the next couple of years. I think you're right. I think you're right that it's going to happen sooner than people think. And I'll pass it to Eric to close us out.
Yeah, so I guess I want to pick up on this. Donors might be the ones that are driving the adoption of AI. That's a really, really interesting take on this. Is wait, I'm going to give you my money, and you're going to have somebody go use the abacus instead of ChatGPT. That's insanity. I'd rather put it. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that will play out across the board. But I think you illustrated it really well from the point of view of not-for-profits. So thank you again, Marley. I really hope we get to have part 2.
Yeah, hopefully.
We might not be here. It might just be avatars of us being run by ChatGPT that you've set up for us, maybe. So maybe we just have a digital twinning strategy. Maybe we'll go with
digital
that.
Twinning, I love that.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you so much. I'm gonna run us out with our outro, and we'll see you guys soon.